Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ohio Has Issues. I'm Stephanie Haney.
I'm Mike Polk. We hope you're having a restful and reflective 9/11, and we appreciate you spending some time with us. We are Ohio's show about politics, the only one that exists. Don't Google it.
Yeah, and happy, I guess, post-presidential debate day, because that's a major topic of conversation that we're going to be digging into today.
Are we really? I haven't looked into all this. Oh my gosh, we are. Ooh, this will be fun.
We'll talk about it a couple times.
Now that you're mentioning it, this does look like it's going to be a pretty interesting show, what with everything we got planned here. Of course, Cleveland.com's Jake Zuckerman is going to be on, and he's going to be speaking with me about the latest developments in the House Bill 6 scandal, or I guess the lack of developments. He does a deep dive into that, and we talk about that a bit. We, of course, have your Senate race update, because we are, in case you were unawares, in probably the most important and contentious Senate race in the country, the one that could decide the balance of the whole Senate. So we matter. Nice job.
Good job, Ohio.
We're going to talk about how VP candidate JD Vance and his messy statements from Springfield, Ohio, about pets and whatnot. Got to talk about that. He's an Ohio boy, everybody, and she's a doozy, isn't she? Do you remember, before I move on, it was probably 4 months ago, it seemed like we were really stretching for material sometimes. We're like, we saw Sherrod Brown drinking coffee last week because there just wasn't a lot going on, and now everything is going on at once.
Everything is going on.
All right, so we're going to get to as much as we can. That includes talking to, who did we talk to? Which strategists did we talk to post-debate?
Yeah, we got our friends of the show, Republican strategist Mehek Cook, and then Democratic strategist Jeff Rusnak back with us to kind of talk about what the debate means to Ohio voters, how that's going to impact what they do when it comes time to vote on November 5th.
And of course, as we do, we like to start with your Ohio Roundup.
Yeah, so let's get you up to speed on what's going on around the great state of Ohio. First, we'll give you an update on abortion access. There is more abortion access in the state of Ohio right now, and that's due to a couple of court rulings. One of those rulings is out of Hamilton County, and because of that, clinics in Ohio can now prescribe the abortion pill mifepristone virtually. So that's a big deal in terms of access. So you can send it to pharmacies, or you can have it directly sent to your home through mail-order medication services now in Ohio. And this is because Democratic Hamilton County Court of Common Pleas Judge Allison Hathaway has temporarily blocked a law that had a bunch of restrictions to abortion in it. So a couple other things now. Instead of just physicians, now nurse practitioners, physician assistants, and certified nurse midwives can prescribe mifepristone. And you don't have to do it anymore within just 9 weeks and 6 days of conception. Now they can give the medication up to 12 weeks and 6 days after conception. That may sound like it's splitting hairs, but 3 weeks can mean a lot to someone.
Sure, absolutely. And you're going to go over these other ones that are now, these are now overturned? Are these also?
These are things that you can do now.
You can do now.
You can do these now, okay?
But you couldn't before.
You could not before.
Because just for the very dense, like myself, who am just picking up on this, these are laws that were put into place by the Ohio legislature pre-Roe v. Wade being overturned, when it was always the goal to overturn Roe v. Wade, but they were having difficulty doing it. So what they tried to do was try and limit it as much as possible by using little laws and tweaks on the law to make it difficult and limit the ability to.
Yeah, and the key to this here is this was put in place before Ohio added an amendment to our state constitution that happened just this past November that guaranteed access to abortion. So that's the key here, is these restrictions could potentially, this is still being determined. This is a temporary block on these, but this is available right now. The biggest change is access to telemedicine, so you can talk to someone virtually and have them prescribed to you, and then you can get it sent to you. Now, in Franklin County as well, in late August, a judge blocked the state's law requiring a 24-hour waiting period in order to get abortion care. And so now abortion clinics are able to provide same-day care in those instances. And as I mentioned, all based on the amendment guaranteeing abortion access.
Now, each of these has to be overturned individually, though, or challenged at a court level. Like
They're being
none
challenged.
of them are just automatically overturned as soon as the amendment passed. They each have to be challenged until.
Now the courts have to decide what is and is not constitutional based on the Ohio State Constitution.
Okay.
And the Ohio Attorney General is not pleased with this. There is some disagreement here. So we've got a statement from the Ohio Attorney General's office.
Yes, this is from Bethany McCorkle, the Attorney General's Communications Director. It's Dave Yost, of course. Quote, "We have heard the voices of the people and recognize that reproductive rights are now protected in our Constitution. However, we respectfully disagree with the court's decision that requiring doctors to obtain informed consent and wait 24 hours prior to an abortion constitute a burden." And then we have a second comment here from the U.S. office. "These are essential safety features designed to ensure that women receive proper care and make voluntary decisions. These measures were consistently upheld under Roe v. Wade. We plan to appeal this ruling."
So we wait and see, but as of right now, that's where the state of abortion access is in the state of Ohio, while this temporary block is in place and this sorts itself out.
All right, well, no, we got to move on to redistricting.
Yes, so the ballot language for the redistricting amendment. As a reminder, the redistricting amendment is all about fixing our badly gerrymandered voting districts here in the state of Ohio. They've been adjudicated to be badly gerrymandered. That's not an opinion. The Ohio Supreme Court has ruled that the voting districts in Ohio are gerrymandered. What the Ohio Supreme Court has not ruled on yet is the ballot language that will summarize the redistricting amendment and put that before voters in November when they go to the ballot. And sooner than November, actually, because of early voting and mail-in voting, but we'll get to that in just a minute. So we know that the state of Ohio will pay more than $400,000 in order to publish this ballot summary language. This is the language that appears when you go to cast your ballot, because they can't put the full amendment in there because that would just be absolutely wild. People would be reading and reading and reading. It would take forever to vote. Okay, so this has to be published in newspapers in the 3 weeks leading up to the election. So that puts us in around mid-October. Well, this language is being challenged right now because the people that support the amendment say that the Ohio Ballot Board has created very misleading language that actually says that this amendment does the exact opposite of what it does.
Right, a reminder, this is an anti-gerrymandering amendment, and they actually use the term gerrymandering as if this amendment is intending to cause gerrymandering instead of try to prevent it.
Yeah, so it's not settled yet. This ballot language is not settled yet, but it has to be settled, and soon, because military and overseas voting starts September 20th. And you know what they need in order to do that voting? The summary ballot language,
right,
which has not yet been decided. So I am kind of concerned about that timeline, because today's September 11th, and that first round of voting for those people in the military and overseas starts September 20th. So we reached out to the Secretary of State's office about this and got a response back.
I'm blowing it. Where is it?
It's right here.
Oh, thank you. We have provided the court with an affidavit outlining critical election timelines, including those related to the UOCAVA voting. When the court makes a decision, we are confident our dedicated elections officials at the county boards of elections are prepared to respond accordingly. Ohio will once again have a secure and accessible election where every Ohioan has the opportunity to make their voice heard.
So a little bit of a non-response there, but we did ask if there's kind of like a plan or what this will do in order for timing, and that's what they said. They said that the Supreme Court is aware of the timing, so basically that was a kind of a punt. The Supreme Court's aware of the timing, and we're going to make it work.
A couple of, I do understand the importance of this. Of course, it's silly that they're playing with this language. Of course, I think the language is incredibly appropriate. You can't say, the people are like, we're trying to do an anti-gerrymandering amendment, thank you. And the language shouldn't be, we want to gerrymander. Like, that's obviously ridiculous. It's just patently ridiculous. So that stinks and everything. At the same time, the panic about like the newspaper ad seems a little bit, and I wouldn't say panic, who's panicking? Maybe just me or other people around here, but that doesn't seem like that huge of a deal. First of all, I'm not sure how many actual physical newspapers are being read currently anymore, so it's not like it used to be. This law was created, I'm sure, back in the day when everyone had like 2 newspapers a day or whatnot, and now I'm not sure how many. And also, I remember receiving those because they legally have to include those when they're trying to have an amendment measure like that on the ballot, and I don't remember specifically reading through those 75 pages within the Plain Dealer to try and be like, I don't like this language with like a jeweler's loop to try and, I don't know if anybody's even paying attention to that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more important question is getting this ballot language sorted out before that early voting starts, and so that these mail-in ballots can get printed. And remind you, it was not that long ago that we had this whole big conversation about whether then candidate President Joe Biden would be on the ballot in Ohio because he had to be certified certified by early August so that the ballots could be printed in time. But the ballots cannot be printed right now because this language is not certain. So I think that's the bigger issue. Also, the fact that the state's going to spend over $400,000 to do this. I mean, I can think of a lot of things to do with $400,000. So it's a big amount of money to be spent.
It's just kind of insult to injury too, obviously, because we all know that the language is not exactly precise.
Yeah, and if you get into the nitty-gritty on this story too, by the way, about the timing and the ballot language and the $400,000, there was a committee that had to approve that budget for the $400,000, and they wanted the people beholden here, Secretary of State LaRose, to sign something that says he was going to uphold the truth of the amendment and that kind of thing. So a little bit of that, like a very in the weeds in the backstory here, but long story short is we still don't have the summary ballot language for this.
Bold moves. Okay, speaking of bold moves, you guys remember the largest bribery scandal in Ohio history, the HB6 scandal?
I do.
Okay, well, it's still a part of our lives, and there are still some people who have not been held accountable. What's happening with those state cases against Chuck Jones, Mike Dowling, and Larry Householder? Those are the gentlemen from First Energy. We know
Except for Larry Householder, the former
Larry
Ohio
Householder,
House Speaker.
thank you. But those first two, what's going on with those cats? When are they going to get their comeuppance? Well, our friend Jake Zuckerman from Cleveland.com spoke with me about his research as of late.
Sorry about that, everybody. We had some technical issues with that video. We're gonna.
That's not true. We just froze up. We ran out of things to say. Jake and I just stared at each other. Just kidding. No, there were some technical issues.
So we're going to get that sorted out, and we are going to show that interview in full with our good friend Jake Zuckerman. But for now, we are going to get you updated on your Senate race here in Ohio.
All right, you want to start?
Yeah, so let's get started. We've got some updates for you from Republican challenger Bernie Moreno. He had a couple campaign events last week that there were things that were of note pertaining to those campaign events. So first up, we want to show you this flyer from one of those events. And if you take a note on this flyer, of course you see Senator Marco Rubio was there, but below that you see that Tony Sifani was listed as a supporter, and it turns out that Sifani was found to have bribed a federal agent in 1998. So I asked Moreno's team about this, if they knew and what kind of access and influence Sifani would have over Moreno if he got elected. Got this statement from his spokesperson, Reagan McCarthy, for the campaign, quote, "We were unaware of this and did not accept his donation." Okay, so another event that was held last week in support of Bernie Moreno featured Senator Rick Scott, listed as a supporter, and just something to note here that Senator Rick Scott is kind of known for proposing sunsetting Social Security. So in that same email where I asked Moreno's campaign about the support from Sifani, I also asked if Moreno supported sunsetting Social Security. Didn't get a response back to that question.
It's good graphic design. I have to say that. It's good spacing. There's not too much white space, not too much dead space. I like the color contrast.
Yeah, I mean, it matches our graphics.
Look,
So there's that.
Nothing else.
All right, now there's also new reporting from Ohio Capitol Journal's Marty Schladen. He's been on the show before.
Hi, Marty.
And this reporting is that Moreno does not have an MBA, but a couple of things out there say that he does. So Moreno's biography for the board of the Cleveland Foundation said that he had an MBA from the University of Michigan. Now, if we scroll down a little bit on this website, we'll see a screenshot of a bio, and that's it right there. You're taking a look at it there. And that highlighted part there says, from 2014, Moreno launched his career in the automotive industry after earning his Master of Business Administration from the University of Michigan. Moreno never told the foundation that he held an MBA. That is according to his spokesperson, Reagan McCarthy. She says that she's not sure why they listed that we would have to ask them, which we did not do. But she did not respond to a question asking whether Moreno took any steps to correct the claim. Now, another place where it was listed that Moreno had an MBA was a car dealership application, and this was from November 2011. And it was to open the Infiniti car dealership that he started in Coral Gables, Florida. The reason that we were able to access this is because it was part of a Florida lawsuit. Moreno's campaign on this account said that it was prepared by a staffer who made a mistake, and then provided a quote from someone named Rob Kistler. The campaign said that was Moreno's chief financial officer at the time, and that it was a clerical mistake on the subsequent form not made by Bernie. That was a quote from Kistler, according to the campaign. Now, the University of Michigan Office of Public Affairs said that he has a bachelor's degree from there, so not an MBA. So Moreno does not have an MBA, but it was listed in multiple places that he does.
The University of Michigan Office of Public Affairs did say that he was awarded a bachelor's degree in business with high distinction on April 28th, 1989, my sister's birthday.
Oh.
Does that matter to any of you? I think it should. Birthdays are important to people.
Sure, yeah.
It's charming. We're letting you into our lives.
Okay, so that's a little bit about what's going on with the Moreno campaign.
Now, before we get to Sherrod Brown, we're obviously going to need your Don Kissick update.
The Libertarian challenger.
Yes, reminder, there are not just two people on the ballot for the Senate. There's also Don Kissick, Libertarian.
That is true.
What's the update?
Well, I would love to tell you more about him.
Oh.
But his platform on his website is from 2018.
Okay.
So can't really tell you anything more about him. Can only tell you...
Especially because if there's one thing we know, it's that candidates, he might not have these same stances anymore. People are changing with the weather these days, you know, but Don Kissick seems like a man, if nothing else, who probably sticks to his guns. And there's no pun there. Or no,
Okay.
I wasn't trying to be funny.
Like, I don't really know his stance.
No,
on guns.
I don't know his stance on guns. Well, he's very pro-civil liberty and libertarian, so I'm guessing he's pretty cool on the gun thing. But I don't care to speak for Don Kissick. If you'd like to know how Don Kissick, your libertarian candidate, felt in 2018 about the issues, different times. Only forever ago, sometimes. But anyways, go and check that out.
DonKissick.org.
Your Don Kissick update.
Okay, a little bit about Sherrod Brown, the incumbent, the Democrat, Senator Sherrod Brown. So we're talking about debates, right? So I asked his team again, is there going to be a debate? You know, we would volunteer to moderate it. I would moderate a debate.
Sure.
Yes. Happy to serve.
Call to serve.
They referred back to a past statement, though, which we talked about in our last show. He told WLWT in Cincinnati, quote, "Absolutely, I've debated, I think, every time I've ever run for office. I'm fine with debating. I hope we schedule something."
There you go. How about Mr. Moreno? Has he said whether or not he wants to?
I believe that he has said publicly that he would debate, and he's open to it.
What are we waiting for, guys?
Yeah,
let's
let's
go
do
at
it.
it.
Schedule it up.
Ohio would like to see that. I have one more thing that I wanted to mention about Sherrod Brown, and that has to do with polling, because polling is generally. Sorry, we're having a fire drill, right? Nope, we're good. It's
A little bell went off in the background.
It's all right.
It's a live newsroom, folks.
This is like recent polling. Now, as you know, most of the polling has been pretty good so far for Sherrod Brown. In fact, he's been up by 2 or 3 points almost everywhere that we've.
In the scant amount of polling.
Yeah, there
that
has
we
not
have
been
seen.
a lot of polling, but this is an article from Newsweek, and that came out on September 8th about a recent poll and this still isn't, this is noteworthy. Sherrod Brown's lead over Bernie Moreno narrows in latest Senate poll. Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown's lead over Republican challenger Bernie Moreno has narrowed to just 2 points in a recent poll, intensifying the race for Ohio's Senate seat ahead of the 2024 election. The poll was conducted by Emerson College, which is a legitimate place. It's considered like the 9th most reliable, according to, what's the place that, 538, which ranks all of these polls and the legitimacy of these polls. So it found that 46% of respondents supported Brown, while 44% backed Moreno. Again, it should be noted that he has not, in all of the polling, again, scant polling that we've had, Sherrod Brown has always been in the lead, but that's the first time that we have seen that it get that close. And so that's important to note. Okay,
good to know. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with you in just a moment here on Ohio Has Issues.
Okay, and we're hearing from our tech team now in the control room. There's 65 people in there working on the show as we speak, and all of them agree that they now have the video of Jake Zuckerman figured out, and we're going to take a look at it.
Great.
Jake, the HB6 scandal, you sick of it yet?
Never.
It's considered the largest bribery scandal in state history. And by the way, when can we get rid of the "it's considered" and just call it the largest bribery scandal? Is anyone making a case? Is there some Dayton professor who's making a case for a larger bribery scandal, or no?
There's no one that has come out, who wants to go back and assess every bribery scandal and adjust it for inflation. I think I could pretty confidently say that it is the biggest.
I'm just saying we could save ourselves a lot of ink if we could just drop that. I say we just drop it until some nerd comes to claim his reward, his actually medal, when he points
we will
out.
write our corrections when you show us we're wrong.
Yeah, you're right. That would be a nightmare. Never mind. Keep doing your thing. So here, I actually prepared an intro for you. Jake, I think we can all agree that when crimes like theft or murder take place, only one person is punished because there was only one person who did anything wrong. The other person was a victim. Bribery is a different kind of crime in that there are two perpetrators. It takes two people to commit a crime. So therefore, there must be two people who are guilty when a bribe takes place. Is that correct?
Logically, one would assume that's correct.
Okay, now having said that, is anyone who took bribes in the HB6 scandal in jail?
Yes, the central figure there, Larry Householder.
And surely then, is anyone who gave bribes in the HB6 scandal in jail?
No.
Well, I thought we just established that that's not how that works. There have to be two criminals. So that's what you wanted to find out. You've been digging into this in a great article that I like very much. And you did this with who's your partner that you did this with?
It's with Adam Farisi from Cleveland.
Oh, okay. So, and do you give him more credit or you?
He pulled a lot of legwork for the story.
Okay, you did a lot, and it really is good. Everybody should check it out on Cleveland.com. I should have mentioned that. It's it's an excellent piece. So the piece is called DOJ called it the biggest bribery case in Ohio history. Did they let the bribers walk? I'm just going to read the opening part just to set the table for you, and then you can take it from there. From your article. The U.S. Department of Justice has sent an Ohio House Speaker to prison for taking a bribe, secured an indictment of a top regulator for the same, and coaxed an admission from First Energy that two of its executives had paid them off. More than 4 years since the first arrests, though, the federal government hasn't charged any First Energy executives, other politicians, or operatives who advanced the scheme to force Ohio's ratepayers into a $1.3 billion bailout of two nuclear plants opened at the time by the company. Relatively little evidence suggests that that is likely to change. The reasons why are murky. End quote. So, what were you guys able to find out, Jake? Why have federal prosecutors so far failed to actually go after First Energy executives, who were the actual source of the bribery money, of course, as far as you could tell?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the only person who really knows what U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Ohio, Ken Parker, is thinking is Ken Parker. We asked Ken Parker to talk to us. He would not do an interview. We sent him questions. They, by and large, did not answer those questions. They sent a statement to the effect of the investigation is ongoing and we think about our charging decisions very carefully. But like you hinted at the beginning of this program, it's a most obvious question. If somebody accepted a bribe, why has no one been accused of paying it? And we worked the phones. We talked to a lot of sources. I can't get into who they are, but they're close to the investigation. They're familiar with the investigation. They too said we don't. Nobody can say for certain what's going on or that this is finished. But there are different ideas here. Some of those are, for one, the Department of Justice has, in the past 20 years, a common criticism is they've kind of lost their way when it comes to prosecuting corporate crime. Nobody went to jail after the 2008 financial collapse. We live, the U.S. Department of Justice lives in a legal arena that ultimately the U.S. Supreme Court has proven very skeptical of these kinds of prosecutions. They have overturned charges in New Jersey, Virginia. There's a big Enron case. One of the people convicted in the Enron scandal really narrowed the game that prosecutors can really play here. There are questions.
Can I ask in those cases, was it as I'm not familiar with like all of or the history of those cases. I'm not expecting you to be necessarily, but this seems like a pretty legal slam dunk as opposed to if those might have been murkier cases, the Exxon situation. I'm not sure. Doesn't it seem like this is unique in the fact that they've already acknowledged paying the bribes and whatnot? I've got to believe that this is a stronger case than probably even those.
Right. So, I don't, it's a complex issue because, the number that gets kicked around, the Department of Justice likes to call this a $60 million bribe. That's really not quite accurate. Some of this money was probably legal. It's hard to say exactly which payments were and were not. But you got to remember, like, whether you like it or not, First Energy has a right to make anonymous political contributions through 501c4s. House Bill 6 was legislation that directly affected their bottom line, a corporation spending money trying to encourage people to support that issue, to encourage lawmakers. That's legitimate. You cannot pay a bribe. So almost beyond certainty with Larry Householder, the money that he received from First Energy that paid off his house, paid off his credit card, paid off his legal debt, that is illegitimate. A public official cannot accept that money. Now, part of the theory of the prosecution of him is he also accepted money that was perhaps legal, except it gave him this political benefit. It gave him the Speaker of the House, and it is cool to be the Speaker of the House. You have a lot of power. You have huge amounts of influence. People like you and want to talk to you. That's a benefit. Can a company induce that benefit in a public official? That's a murkier question. And then some of the money was almost certainly legal. So you really have to delineate that, and that's not an easy line to draw. And also part of the issue here, like in Larry Householder's case, the judge actually kept out of evidence First Energy's admission that it bribed Larry Householder, which is, it's crazy to think about until you really get into the details and you realize, First Energy is not a person. You can't ask First Energy, you can't cross-examine First Energy. And the CEO who signed that deferred prosecution agreement has since been forced to retire by and large from First Energy. So
I'm sure he's destitute on the street now, right?
yes, I'm sure he's living under a bridge.
Poor guy.
Shouldn't even joke about that. So it's just it's a thorny issue.
We're in a unique situation where somebody can legally be accused or take a bribe, but it could be considered murkier and more of a donation on one end and a bribe on the other end.
Mm-hmm. Well, and another thing to look into here is, so there are two other things I didn't address in your question earlier. For one, the U.S. Department of Justice, can I curse? Can I curse here?
Please do it a lot.
Please do it a lot.
Okay. As you want. Yeah, please bring it on.
James Comey, if you remember him from the Trump years.
Of course. Yeah, he's much
director,
taller than people would assume. Yes, I do.
Very tall man. He referred to a group of U.S. attorneys as a chicken shit club, in that they're chicken shit because they don't want to bring cases that they might lose. When the federal government brings charges against people, that means they've got them. This isn't, oh, we're going to charge them and see what kind of evidence we can find. Oh, hopefully they plead guilty so nobody calls our bluff at trial. No, if they're bringing charges, they have got them. And I think that the state, who has also filed separate charges, you get a sense of more of a cowboy attitude. You know what? Like, we think a crime happened here. We're going to make our best case to a jury. Let the facts speak for themselves. I don't think the Department of Justice has that culture. And also the Department of Justice, they would be going against many of their former colleagues. Another story we run in this package is that there are 11 former state and federal prosecutors who are working for Chuck Jones. If you remember, and Chuck Jones being the former CEO of First Energy. Wow. If you remember some news stories about hearing about Joe Biden, who was an elderly man with a feeble memory, something to that effect. That was from a former senior Department of Justice official named Robert K. Hur. He was hired as a special counsel. He deposed President Joe Biden. You don't let just anybody do that. He is representing Chuck Jones now in a related civil lawsuit. The former chief of staff and general counsel to the Federal Energy Regulatory Council, which regulates nuclear power plants, the subject of the bailout in House Bill 6, is working for Chuck Jones. Very famous prosecutors, for people who are paying attention to like some of the organized mob crimes in the 80s, the five families of New York City. The people who put those people in jail are now representing the First Energy defendants here. So, and
the people who know the ins and outs of that system better than anyone, of course.
They're very talented lawyers, and they know how the Department of Justice works. That is, it's an intangible advantage in their corner, and the Department of Justice knows what they are up against there.
Yeah, because they're essentially beefing up their side of the table and saying, do you guys really want to come after this? Is that what you're interested in? A little bit of that.
And there are political considerations. Imagine what an acquittal would do. I mean, imagine what that would do to Larry Householder. Imagine what that would do to a federal government who has like really, really dragged these people through the mud, correctly or incorrectly, for years now. If all of a sudden the CEO who paid, the biggest bribe in state history is a free man, is an innocent man. I think that's at least some sources think that's a risk the Department of Justice is not willing to take.
So that's not looking good from a federal perspective, unfortunately. But we've still got those state charges. Will that be the thing that gets them? Is that what's going to make these guys pay?
So there's a big hearing this week. The defendants in those cases have filed motions to dismiss. There are different motions. Some motions are just to dismiss individual charges on the indictment. See if you can, just chip away at the thing, if not strip it out entirely. And there are motions to dismiss the entire case. I think those are going to pose really the first big test for this case. Like, can the state really back up what it's depicting? The state case is a little different from the federal one. The state is depicting a more fundamentally corrupt relationship in the big picture sense, not just House Bill 6, but also an alleged bribe from the company to Sam Randazzo, the former PUCO chairman. I help within the governor's office. The governor is not charged or accused of wrongdoing, but by the state's indictment, there are people within the governor's office who facilitated the scandal, his former chief of staff being one of them. So, the state is taking a very big swing. By all signs, they're very zealously prosecuting this case. There are, like we reported in the story, there are indications of agreements between.
Right, you said that unlike in the federal case, state court rules require prosecutors to publicly disclose some information about their case. So you got to see some of that, and it gave you some hints.
That's correct. First Energy, a former First Energy executive. There are indications he's a party to a quote NPA. NPA is a very common abbreviation for non-prosecution agreement. No official sources wanted to confirm that much. A similar story with Ty Pine, a First Energy lobbyist. There's a document that was disclosed in the case called Pine Immunity. One could conjecture that Ty Pine has signed an immunity agreement, but again, no sources want to confirm that. And there are more explicit references to proffer letters, which are sort of ways that people who might be somewhere on the edge of criminal conduct can give information to prosecutors without that information being used against them in a prosecution. There are a lot of those agreements that were made from former First Energy people, former Ohio House staff. So it does seem like the state has really amassed a lot of evidence and is very serious about this case.
And how zealous, not to be cynical, but how zealous do you think that Dave Yost should be going about this case, or will be going about this case, especially given that he has governor aspirations? At least that's not just the rumor. I think it's pretty much confirmed that he's planning on running for governor. Not just, I mean, that does. I'm not saying that necessarily has to compromise him, but it does have to complicate some of the politics of it in some way, right?
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, the politics are very weird. Lieutenant Governor John Husted works for Mike DeWine, is expected to be a gubernatorial candidate against Dave Yost. Dave Yost is a witness to events. He's in prosecuting events. Mm-hmm. He's ostensibly defending some of the people who, like John Husted, who have not been accused of wrongdoing, but are, if nothing else, have been summoned for testimony in the case. So Dave Yost is in a precarious spot. I think he's exposed to some of the same politics we talked about with the DOJ, in that who wants to fall on their face in public, who wants to just fall flat on their face. But as far as how zealous are they about it, it's a tough question to answer from the outside. Again, the AG's office didn't want to talk about this case, but we do know that some court records show that there was Sam Randazzo, who we mentioned earlier. He died. The Franklin County coroner has diagnosed it as suicide. Almost immediately after his suicide, the state executed a search warrant of the warehouse where Sam Randazzo died. I think you can interpret that different ways, but that sounds, to me at least, like a serious investigation. I don't think that's something you do lightly. Suicide is an incredibly sensitive issue,
right?
And I don't think that they're worried about this appearance of coming on too strong with a move like that.
Like a Tom Clancy novel, and you weave quite a tale, friend. I appreciate it. What are you working on right now?
Springfield. I was in Springfield, Ohio for their city council meeting last night.
Ooh, that's got to be entertaining. Can you give us a little tease, a little hint of what you encountered there?
Some people took very serious offense. Some Haitians and some natives just took very serious offense to this claim from elite Republican politicians that people are eating cats and dogs. There's absolutely no evidence to believe that's true. Some sources are saying it's just exploitation. It is a racist form of exploitation. But unmistakably, there were people who I talked to last night who believe these claims, who do not think Haitians should be in Springfield.
But you yourself did not see any dog barbecues going on or any kind of cat kebabs or anything like that?
No, I did not. And frankly, like, it's an uncomfortable question to seriously ask people, smart, intelligent people who just escaped a war-torn place to ask, do you or your friends eat cats and dogs? I mean, it's a pretty gross place our politics has arrived.
Well, thank you for exposing it, and that's a gross task to have to do, but thank you for doing it. Appreciate all your work. Thanks for joining us, Jake.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerman. Always informative.
Yes.
Yeah. What?
Great backdrop.
Oh yeah, my deer backdrop.
You went with the deer backdrop, huh?
Mm-hmm. I love the deer backdrop. I wish you wouldn't have cropped it out. I thought it looked, when you get the whole gestalt of it, it makes a lot more sense.
There was more deer backdrop.
There's several more deer that you didn't get to see.
To tighten it up a little bit.
Always next week.
I can't wait.
All right, well, what's next?
Well, as you guys were kind of talking about at the end there, this whole Springfield, Ohio thing.
This has turned into quite a hullabaloo.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. And you know what this all started with? A tweet from Senator JD Vance. He tweeted claiming that Haitians are stealing and eating people's pets in Springfield, Ohio. And then he said it again after the debate last night, and President Donald Trump said it during the debate. Well, here's a spoiler for you. It's false.
Yeah.
Not a true thing. We want to give you a little more detail about it. So here is Colin Dorsey from our National Verify team.
The town of Springfield, Ohio has become the center of the immigration debate, with high-profile politicians claiming Haitian immigrants have caused disruptions in the city. During Tuesday's debate, former President Donald Trump amplified these claims, sharing unfounded allegations about the Haitian immigrant population.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Many Verify viewers reached out to ask whether this is actually happening. So we went to these sources to get an answer. There is no evidence to support these claims. Springfield City Manager Brian Heck said in a recorded statement on Wednesday.
It is disappointing that some of the narrative surrounding our city has been skewed by misinformation circulating on social media and further amplified by political rhetoric in the current highly charged presidential election cycle.
Karen Graves, a spokesperson for the city, told Verify there have been no credible reports or specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community. Rose Tamar Joseph, operations manager for the Haitian Support Center in Springfield, confirms.
All of those rumors that we knew about it, like they just saw it on the social media. That's how we knew about it also.
So you're saying there's no truth to the claims?
No.
So we can verify that there is no evidence to support these viral claims. So where did it stem from? It appears to have started in a local Facebook group and then gained traction during an August 27th Springfield, Ohio commission meeting when a man who describes himself as a social media influencer brought up the claim without any evidence. With your Verify in Springfield, Ohio, I'm Colin Dorsey.
Thank you to Colin for making the trip to Springfield to bring us those details. Now, it seems like everywhere you look, news outlets are covering this. The New York Times published this story this afternoon, and the headline of it is, "Grieving Ohio Father Tells Trump and Vance to Stop Talking About His Son." So here's just a little bit from this article. I'm reading from the article right now. Barely an hour before the debate in Springfield, the father of an 11-year-old boy killed when an immigrant's minivan crashed into a school bus lashed out at Mr. Trump and his running mate JD Vance, calling them, quote, morally bankrupt politicians spreading hate at the expense of his son, Aiden. Speaking during public comment at a regular meeting of the Springfield City Commission, the father, Nathan Clark, said, "This needs to stop now."
Here's a quote from Clark in the Springfield News-Sun. "I wish that my son, Aiden Clark, was killed by a 60-year-old white man. I bet you never thought anyone would say something so blunt. But if that guy killed my 11-year-old son, the incessant group of hate-spewing people would leave us alone." He went on. "The last thing that we need is to have the worst day of our lives violently and constantly shoved in our faces. But even that's not good enough for them. They take it one step further. They make it seem that our wonderful Aiden appreciates your hate, that we should follow their hate."
Now you can actually hear a little bit of Nathan Clark speaking for yourself. Here's that video clip.
And speaking of morally bankrupt, politicians Bernie Moreno, Chip Roy, JD Vance, and Donald Trump, they have spoken my son's name and used his death for political gain. This needs to stop now.
The Rooster, who's a great follow, he's a real, I guess you call him a roustabout on the Columbus scene. He's always down at the courthouse and hassling anybody, and pretty much anybody who walks in there. It's very entertaining to watch. I would recommend it, and he does good work down there.
A little bit more about him.
Oh yeah, tell him a little bit more.
Yeah,
about
so if you go to the Rooster has a website. His X username, Twitter username, what have you, is Rooster_Ohio. His real name is DJ Burns. He is a former Ohio House candidate from Marion, Ohio. He's actually the person who broke that story about Urban Meyer with a woman who was not his significant other. And he has been featured in a lot of different outlets, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Columbus Dispatch pretty often. And you can pay actually to subscribe to his newsletter, which comes out at an ungodly hour 3 days a week. It comes out at 4:33 a.m., very specific, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
He's really interesting and relatively problematic cat, and I think he's fascinating. And he's a good follow.
He gets right up in there too. He knows where the members of the General Assembly are going to be. He knows where he can be. He goes and he gets in there.
He goes for it.
It's very interesting.
Okay. Oh, that also, I wanted to bring this up. This is sort of connected to the earlier thing about Springfield. There were 50 of the 50 states. 49 of the states during the debate last night where the number one Google search term was the same issue. Can you guess what that issue was?
Well, I could guess, but we have a graphic.
Let's
show
see it.
people.
Never mind. This is from
well.
Andrew Tobias, by the way, of course, from Cleveland.com, our good friend, Andy Toby.
Yeah, this is a Google Trends report.
And so
it was abortion.
Yes, abortion was for 49 of the 50 states. Only one state was different from that. That was Ohio, and that state was immigration. Or that word was immigration here in Ohio.
So not necessarily the search term itself, but the political issue.
Yes, the
so
political
abortion
issue.
was the top searched political issue in 49 of the 50 states after the debate last night.
Yes.
But in Ohio, the top searched political issue was immigration.
Which is, interesting. You would think if one of the states that was going to be immigration might be somewhere on the southern border, possibly, not on the Canadian border. We haven't had a ton of problems up there yet. But obviously, it was the Springfield thing probably that goosed those numbers because that's really on people's minds right now.
Because the former president repeated the false claim in the middle of the debate.
And the vice president keeps doubling down on it and suggesting, frankly, pretty racist stuff like that the people are eating pets, even though there is no proof of that, as you heard earlier, and as we verified. So it's pretty. That's what's getting the clicks, though.
Yeah,
I guess.
that's what people are searching for.
It is. It's gross to watch.
It's
pretty gross to watch.
I think Jake Zuckerman described it very well when he said it's kind of a gross time in politics when he had to go ask these people if they are eating pets.
Yeah.
So after watching the debate last night, or if you didn't watch it after hearing about it, you might be wondering, what's the impact of all this? Who won? Well, NBC News' Alice Barr did a report on that today, so let's hear that.
The reaction is pouring into last night's debate. So much ground covered, so a lot to comb through, but we're still waiting to see the true impact with undecided voters in this incredibly tight race. In a somber encounter at the 9/11 memorial today, Vice President Harris and former President Trump shaking hands and standing in solidarity with the victims of the nation's worst terror attack 23 years ago. The moment a stark contrast to last night's fiery debate that quickly moved from handshake to gloves off.
The worst vice president in the history of our country.
I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace.
Former President Trump on Fox News today calling it his best debate while suggesting he would not face off again.
Well, I'd be less inclined to because we had a great night. We won the debate.
Democratic fundraising surged off widespread analysis of a big night for Vice President Harris. She won the endorsement of superstar Taylor Swift. And undecided swing state voters NBC News spoke with largely leaned toward her winning the debate.
You could tell that she was prepared and she knew exactly how to get under Trump's skin.
The vice president went in planning to needle her rival and at times appeared to throw him. This reference to crowd sizes.
People start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
We have the biggest rallies.
Leading the former president into an attack on Harris's record that veered into debunked conspiracy theories about immigrants in Ohio.
They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
There were heated exchanges over reproductive rights.
The government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
And the economy.
We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before.
Yet to be seen how much the debate will shift the race for the White House.
Now we got one more quick fact check for you on the debate from last night. Well, actually, a couple more. We got to do this one first. Starting with the Trump on, we're going to start with the Trump on Springfield again because that was obviously a very important thing, and then we'll move on to other topics, I promise. But this is going on in our state right now, folks, and it's the story du jour. So here with another Verify from our national Verify team is Casey Decker.
For the first time, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump squared off on the debate stage.
Let's have a good debate.
Have fun. Our Verify team closely tracked the claims the two candidates made, fact-checking them to see what's true and what's false. To do that, we used these sources. On the topic of immigration, Trump repeated a claim that's been circulating widely on social media the past few days about a small town in Ohio that has experienced a large influx of Haitian migrants.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
This claim is false. It appears to have started from an unsubstantiated rumor shared online, and there's no evidence to support it. The city of Springfield, the Springfield Police Division, and the Clark County Park District have all issued statements saying they haven't gotten a single report of pets being stolen or eaten. A city spokesperson added, quote, "There have been no verified instances of immigrants engaging in illegal activities, such as squatting or littering in front of residents' homes." Later in the debate, the focus shifted to energy, specifically fracking, a key issue in Pennsylvania, the swing state where the debate was held. Trump said Harris wants to ban the practice, which she denied.
I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States.
This claim needs context. It's true that there is no federal ban on fracking, and the Biden administration has not pursued one. But when Harris first ran for president in 2019, she said during a town hall, quote, "There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking." Once she was chosen as Joe Biden's running mate, she changed her position and made public statements promising the new administration would not ban fracking. She's kept that position since, reiterating in a recent CNN interview, quote, "As president, I will not ban fracking." The two also squared off on the economy, each claiming it was better off during their time in the White House.
When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation.
Trump's claim is false. Inflation was low during much of his term, but it was not zero. Inflation is an increase in prices. The government tracks it with the Consumer Price Index, a figure that represents the relative cost of a basket of common goods. From when Trump took office to when he left, prices rose by 7.7%. That's an average yearly inflation rate of 1.9%, almost exactly the rate the Federal Reserve says is ideal for a healthy and stable economy. We fact-checked a bunch more claims from this debate. Read them at verifythis.com. With your Verify, I'm Casey Decker.
Very useful. Thank you, Casey.
Yeah, verifythis.com if you want to see more fact-checking on the debate. Now we'll have a conversation about what kind of impact the debate will have here in Ohio. Ohio for a long time was considered a swing state. Maybe not so much anymore.
Seems like quite some time ago. We were the bellwether state. As Ohio goes, so goes the nation. And now we are not even a bellwether state right now.
We are not. We're very important when it comes to the Senate race, but it does seem like the presidential ticket has kind of been decided here for the past couple elections here in Ohio. So what does this all mean? How does this debate even impact Ohio? Let's hear from some experts on that.
Okay, sounds good.
First, we'll bring in Republican strategist, also a surrogate for former President Donald Trump, and a commentator, friend of the show, Mehek Cook. Mehek Cook, thank you for being back with us here on Ohio Has Issues. We appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
So big night last night, the first presidential debate between now the current candidates, former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. I'll just ask you first off the top, because Ohio was really in the spotlight last night. There's been a lot of conversation about the comments related to Springfield, Ohio. The former president had reiterated some claims that we know to be false about Haitians and pets being abducted and eaten in Springfield, Ohio. So how do you think that's going to impact voters here in Ohio when it comes to support for the former president?
Look, I think voters need more information on what's going on in Springfield. I have family there. I grew up there. Part of my life was spent there. And I can tell you, it's such a small town that's tried to achieve the American dream. And today we are being overrun by immigrants. And it's not a problem when you look at America. We want more immigrants to come in. I'm a legal immigrant. I came here legally, but there's a lot of not only issues with infrastructure there, as the president talked about, but there's also allegations about what's happening in our communities, whether it's pets and other things. We don't know what's true and false today, Stephanie, because there are people coming out and saying our pets are missing. But the bottom line is, forget about what is being discussed in terms of he said, she said during that debate. I'm more concerned about the infrastructure in Springfield, how we're going to sustain, because this is a huge issue. You talk about 20,000 individuals. What are we doing in schooling? What are we doing in healthcare? What are we doing in housing? We have an economic housing crisis and so much more. We can't afford illegal immigration. I think that's where we should have continued to stick and talk about how we need to close down our borders and account for Americans first.
And just to clarify here, what's happening in Springfield isn't illegal immigration. That was sort of a plan that was in place. And I think a lot of people would definitely agree. There's certainly an infrastructure issue there. But I do want to fact check that comment about people coming out and saying things are happening with their pets, because the city manager in Springfield has said no reports of that happening. So just wanted to make that note there. Now I want to switch.
Well, I do want to follow up on that then, because it's really important when we talk about immigration, practiced immigration law. I can tell you most individuals that want temporary protection status, they're fleeing a country because of religious persecution. I've been to the border just as many times as Kamala Harris. I didn't take as many photo ops, but I can tell you I met a lot of Haitian immigrants. They're amazing people, but they want to come here for the American dream. When I asked, why are you here? They are programmed and taught to say asylum. And I asked, what are you running from? We want better jobs. That's amazing. My family came here for better jobs. We want more opportunities. That's incredible. I saw women with children. You want the American dream for your family and for your future family, right? But that is not what temporary protection status is. This administration has mucked up this system. Immigration and temporary asylum status or temporary protection status is for those people that are fleeing the country from something. And we had a remain in Mexico policy, which ensured that we were allowing to process individuals in a timely and thoughtful manner. That is the issue in Springfield. And we have to be intellectually honest. We are continuing to open our borders, rubber stamp people to come in, and we don't know who these people are.
We appreciate your perspective on that with your background in immigration. Thank you for that, Mehek. I want to pivot now to reproductive rights. The former president said last night that his stance is great for women when it comes to reproductive rights. Do you think that that will vibe with the people in Ohio?
Look, I think the people in Ohio were very clear on issue one. President Trump is the reason that we were able to actually vote as constituents. You were able to vote, voters were able to vote. I was able to vote on this issue. And overwhelmingly, voters wanted issue one to pass in a way that allowed for reproductive rights in Ohio. Where there's still going to be an issue is parental rights. It's something I've always spoken out about, but President Trump was very clear here. And Kamala Harris was not fact-checked. It's unfortunate that we continue to have the media manipulate and push out lies. Kamala Harris continued to say President Trump wants a national abortion ban, when this man literally sent abortion back to the states so that you and I and other voters could decide. So yes, I think a lot of voters are sitting back. The fact that he came out with even an IVF policy, he's continuing to show that the moral ground is when families are together and we build and achieve that American dream. So I think he continued to have to fact check not only ABC moderators, but Kamala Harris herself.
Pivoting back actually to immigration, there was conversation yesterday about the border bill that was a bipartisan bill that was presented in Congress that the former president is said to have, quote, killed the bill. Do you think that that was the right move there for him to push to have that bill not pass through Congress?
Well, I think we should fact check that, because President Trump didn't push to kill any bill. President Trump specifically said he did not want to continue to rubber stamp illegal immigration. We continue to say bipartisan border bill. And I know that sounds good. It's not bipartisan to allow 5,000 illegal immigrants in daily before Biden decided to shut down the border. That's not bipartisan. That's allowing more illegal immigrants into our country, and we cannot afford it. So President Trump wasn't for that bill. I am somebody who's a legal immigrant. I'm not for rubber stamping illegal immigrants. How about a remain in Mexico policy and to process individuals? And what's painful for me to see today as I watch these individuals that want to come into our country legally, there's a backlog of millions and millions of people from India, from all these great countries that want to come here and achieve the American dream, but they can't because Kamala Harris has an open border policy. So we have to be very clear. That was not bipartisan. That was rubber stamping illegal immigrants into our country. Kamala Harris now wants to build the wall that she called stupid. So I hope if she truly wants to do these things, she still has some time in office and she can start the ball on that.
How are you feeling about the former president's comments related to the economy? Do you think that that's a strong stance that the people here in Ohio will support?
I think that the biggest question that ABC asked initially was, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Kamala Harris did not answer that question, but President Trump continued to talk about prosperity. And look, I think we have to sit back as Ohioans today and ask ourselves, can you afford gas? Can you afford groceries, utilities, housing? And when you have a resounding no, many Americans are saying we're worse off than we were. Eggs were 99 cents. Now we're paying over $2.50. Gas was $1.87 in many of these states. Now it's over in some states. In Ohio, it's around $3.50. In some states, it's $5. So I think that when we sit down and we truly ask ourselves and our families, are we better off? Today, the answer is no. And President Trump continued to talk about economic prosperity and the fact that he had delivered jobs and he continued to deliver for America. And that's truly why he's running. And I think it was evident on stage. He stood there and answered every single question.
One of the questions that he was asked was related to the 2020 election, and he confirmed or reiterated, not confirmed, but reiterated his stance that he did not lose the 2020 election. It was asked about him previously saying we lost by a whisker, and he said that sarcastically and did not lose the 2020 election, but he did lose the 2020 election. So how do you think that's going to impact the vote here in Ohio?
Well, I think it was interesting that the moderator said, lost by a whisker. I didn't really pick up on your tone there. Look, I think the president at the end of the day believes what he believes. I know at the end of the day, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are now in office, and this is why he's running, because he wants to regain the White House so he can implement a rule of law, economic prosperity, and a border that works for everybody. Safety and security is so paramount today. It's something I truly think we have taken for granted. And 9/11, given that that's today, it's a perfect reminder of what it's at stake. It's safety and security, and that's where President Trump shines.
And I'll ask you this one last question before we let you go here. It's a two-parter. What do you think was the strongest point in the former president's delivery yesterday in the debate? And then also something that you think he could improve upon in order to generate goodwill with Ohio voters?
Look, I'll start with the latter question. I think that there was a lot of opportunity where Kamala Harris would throw something out that was intellectually dishonest, and he took the bait, because I think between the moderators asking very pointed questions and pushing and saying yes or no and fact checking on the spot, when they refused to do that for Kamala Harris, he was defending himself. It was almost like a 3-on-1 debate. I wish he just let it go and stick to policy, because that's where he truly shines. I think the best part of the debate was the closing, when President Trump talked about what he has delivered, what he will deliver, and the promises he's going to keep. And again, he's a tried and true tested candidate who has delivered. And all we have to do is sit back and compare and contrast policy between where we can be and where we're going versus Kamala Harris, who truly copied and pasted all of her policies from Joe Biden. So she's no different, and we're going to have 4 more years of the same if she is in the White House.
Mehek, less than 2 months now to Election Day, and then we will know how this all shakes out. Thank you so much for your time here on Ohio Has Issues.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Mehek. Now, we just got the Republican perspective on how the debate went and what's coming on next. I guess, based on what I know of you and your tendency towards balance, you also spoke with a Democrat.
I did. Look at you being
who'd you talk to?
All psychic and stuff. We did also say it at the beginning of the show.
And it's right here.
I talked with Democratic strategist Jeff Rusnak, who's a friend of the show, and a little bit on his background, just so you know why we're talking to these people here. He has played a role in over 150 races at the municipal, county, state, and federal levels. He has been involved in campaigns for Senator Sherrod Brown, Congress member Marcy Kaptur. Also, he was involved in directing Ohio Supreme Court Justice Michael Donnelly's 2018 win and Senator Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign here in Ohio. A little bit about him, and here's his take on what this debate means to Ohioans. Jeff, thank you for being back with us again here on Ohio Has Issues.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's dive into this conversation about the debate. First, the thing I want to ask you is, leading up to the debate, how were you feeling about the kind of conversation that was happening about whether mics should be muted, not muted, different candidate, different approach kind of conversation that was having with Vice President Harris?
Yeah, I mean, I think the muting of the mics was problematic, and I wasn't, if it was enforced, I guess it would have been one thing, but I don't think the rule was really enforced universally. And so I think it's hard to control those conversations in a debate like that, especially when you have somebody like Donald Trump, who's, bombastic, to be kind or mild about how he behaved and acted. And he just rambled on and kept talking and kept interrupting. And so I think it set up some false expectations and hopes that he would actually follow those rules and honor those rules. But they did not mute him, whereas she was muted. It seemed like she was muted far more times than he was. So I don't think that actually worked out.
When we saw the debate, the conversation around Springfield, Ohio came up again. And this was interesting. Google Trends showed that around the country, the most searched term after the debate, political issue-wise, was abortion, or the most searched political issue, not necessarily term. But in Ohio, it was immigration. So does that track? Do Ohioans really care that much about immigration?
Well, I think Ohioans were confused by whatever the claim was that Donald Trump was making, and this really ridiculous spotlight that he put on Springfield, Ohio, unfortunately. And so I think that was part of it, what happened here, and why that was different in Ohio. Also, if you think about it, we settled the reproductive rights issue in abortion last year. Ohio voters overwhelmingly voted for it. So that was put to rest, and we don't have the same issues as many other parts of the country. And despite his ridiculous claim that he was somehow responsible for the passage of that issue, which is preposterous. I mean, it just couldn't be further from the truth. We didn't, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have needed to do this and to pass that issue. And so I think the combination of those two things, these kind of crazy claim, it was so far out there and so outrageous that I think voters were like, what, Ohioans in particular were like, what is he really talking about? And I think that happened time and time again. I think there was so much confusion about the points he was trying to make and what he was saying. He was incoherent. He was confused. He was all rambling. And he was clearly rattled and I think really lost it for the most part.
Let's touch again on the abortion conversation. So yes, here in Ohio, as you mentioned, the amendment passed last November to enshrine abortion access here in the state. Now, there was conversation where the former president was not willing to say that he would veto a national ban if it came to him. So when it comes to the abortion rights access conversation, do you think that did well for Vice President Harris?
Absolutely. I think voters overwhelmingly support abortion rights and reproductive rights and freedoms. I think the polling shows that. Every poll you look at, I think if you looked at the Washington Post analysis of the debate and the focus groups that they did with 25 swing voters, and 2/3 of them said that they agreed with Vice President Harris on abortion and reproductive rights. And I think Donald Trump knows that he made a huge mistake, and he put Americans and jeopardized the health and safety of many Americans, and he's wrong on this issue. And now he's trying to figure out how to get away from what he did. He's running from his own position, and that's why he's all over the place.
Okay, let's talk about Vice President Harris's presentation of her plan for the economy. Do you think that's something, the way it was presented, that will resonate with voters here in Ohio?
Well, I think over time it will. I think she's got to continue to hammer home. She must have said plan, I don't know, 30, 40 times yesterday. He said Keystone Pipeline 30 or 40 times. So, for the bingo cards, those who were keeping score of such things, I think that was those were their points that they wanted to get across. Each of them did that. I think she's got 7, 8 weeks now, less than 8 weeks, 55 days to continue to get those points across and to really lay out her plan. And obviously her plan is a much better plan for middle America. She's a candidate who stands up for the people and for others, and he's a candidate who's looking out for himself, and really only one person, and that is himself.
There was one particular moment, it was kind of what led into actually the Springfield, Ohio comments when Vice President Harris mentioned crowd size at rallies. And that seemed to really kind of throw the former president, Donald Trump, off a bit there. And then later, Vice President Harris actually recommended to people to attend a Trump rally. What do you think about that?
I thought it was a brilliant move. I thought she had him. She clearly was prepared and ready and knew how to draw that out of him. She baited him, and he took the bait, and he really looked weak. He looked frustrated. He looked angry, and all of those characteristics that don't play well with voters came out. And it's true. I mean, if you look at, she's been getting, her rallies have massive crowds. They're energetic, they're enthusiastic, and if you've attended or seen the video of them, people are fleeing his rallies, and they're a fraction of the size of the crowds. He continues to make false claims, and everybody knows that. He doesn't speak with facts. He just makes a bunch of allegations and claims, and there's no fact behind them. They're baseless claims. So I think that came across. I think she was able to extract that from him very effectively, and I think that turns voters off.
One of the things that the former president brought up when he was trying to criticize Vice President Harris was talking about her shifting policies in certain areas. It seems there's been a couple key areas where she's shifted a little bit more moderate, where she had said things that were maybe a little bit more progressive when she was previously in the Democratic primary before the 2020 race. So I want to ask you, here in Ohio, is that an effective strategy? Are there enough of those moderate, undecided, independent voters here in Ohio that could make a difference for the vice president?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that is where the election comes down. I mean, a lot of people are talking about base voters and they're energized. I think that's absolutely the case. I don't think we've seen this kind of enthusiasm since the Obama campaign. And so I do think it's really, a lot of it will come down to those independent suburban voters, especially in a state like Ohio. And I think the same applies to places like Western Pennsylvania, whether you're in Erie, PA, or Pittsburgh, PA. That kind of corridor down Interstate 79 is a very similar way. I think that also matters in southern Michigan as well, in the counties around Detroit. And I think probably the same thing in the counties around Philadelphia as well. Those swing areas around Philadelphia, the suburban areas there. But I do think, I think whoever has that ability to move those independent voters is going to be successful. And I think she's on the right path there. I think when it comes to reproductive rights and issues like that, I think when it comes to the economic issues and tax policies, I think she's definitely in a better place than he is.
You mentioned Western Pennsylvania, and something that's happening there is fracking. That was brought up yesterday during the debate. Previously, Vice President Harris has said that she would support a ban on fracking. I'm talking back in 2020. Now she's saying she would not ban fracking. Does that move the needle at all here in Ohio?
Well, I think Ohio is similar to Pennsylvania in terms of what the fracking that they have, the fracking that exists there and here as well. I think it'll help her. I think, do I think she can win Ohio? Yeah, I think there's an outside chance that she can win Ohio. I think voters are moving and are shifting, and I think people are frustrated and turned off by Donald Trump after all these years. I mean, we saw in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, there was a story about how Trump's numbers are now below 50% in this state. And from what we understand in conversations I've had with my friends on the other side of the aisle, political aisle, they're saying it's, the 4 or 5 point race. Well, that's a game changer in a lot of ways. And it also means that other races become more competitive in this state. That helps if the gap is a lot closer for the down ballot races in a state like Ohio.
There's been some conversation, particularly connected with Senator Sherrod Brown's reelection campaign, of whether or not the vice president will come to Ohio. Do you think that we'll see Vice President Harris in Ohio campaigning?
I'm not sure if we'll see Vice President Harris or Governor Walz here, but I expect one of them will be in the state at some point. I think, and the other thing that's happened recently, or more recently, is that the Harris campaign has bought TV time, both in the Youngstown market and the Toledo media markets. Now, they're doing that because of the importance of Michigan and Pennsylvania, but that's only going to help the campaign, their campaign in Ohio as well. It should help move the needle some here, and I do expect at some point that we will see one of the two principal candidates here.
Okay, and when we talk about strategy here, you're a Democratic strategist, so we now know that Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz, they've been endorsed by 200 Republicans, right, including Liz and Dick Cheney. So you talk about who you're playing to. If you're playing to your base, is that helpful? If you're playing to the moderates, is that helpful? Is that helpful here in Ohio for
It's absolutely helpful. I mean, that, some of those endorsements are really a game changer here. They do make a huge difference when the people who know Donald Trump the best and have worked with him the closest now come out against him. I think that speaks, it says a lot and speaks volumes to what they know about him and whether they trust him going forward. And so everybody from, Vice President Pence, who says he's not voting for him, but along with Vice President Cheney, says he's voting for Vice President Harris, and Liz Cheney as well, but also all the other leaders of this country, whether they're military leaders or policy experts and cabinet members, it's across the board. And so, that doesn't happen. That's not a common occurrence in a campaign. I can't think of any other campaign in the last 40 plus years where we've seen something like that happen, where we've seen that dramatic of a mobilization and outpouring of support from the opposing party, leaders of the opposing party.
Okay. Two more questions for you, Jeff. The first one is a two-parter. I'll ask you both sides of this coin. What was a part of the performance last night from Vice President Harris that you thought could have been stronger in order to resonate with voters, and what was the strongest point?
Good questions. So where could she have been a little better? I think getting into a little bit more detail on her plans. I don't think it takes a lot to do that. I mean, remember, you only have 2 minutes to answer questions. So that's tough. And then when you're also trying to respond or react to the previous question that was asked where something really outrageous or ridiculous was said, and you need to set the record straight and correct it. So you're using up time on that. But I do think just coming up, adding in 2 or 3 very specific points on each issue, on those plans. And I think over time that'll happen, and hopefully there's another debate. And so we really will get into a little bit more detail on plans and what they mean and the differences between the two candidates in those directions. So I thought, but I do think there were a number of times where, to the other question about where did she really succeed or what was the high mark of the campaign, look, there were a bunch of them. I mean, let's be clear. 2/3 of the people out there thought she clobbered him in this debate. And whether it was a poll or a focus group, there's no question about it. This was a desperate guy who really lost control at many points during the debate. And so it's hard to point to one single moment, but I think just the way she's set up, that she's for you and for the people, and he's for himself. Okay, and so she made that case throughout the debate, and really brought that into focus on many questions. And I do think that's just kind of a fundamental difference and a fundamental point that came across very clearly. Look, it seemed to me like when she got on the abortion issue, when that came up, that was kind of like the turning point in some way. It just kind of turned her on, turned on the engines and got things going. And from that point on, she was just, she was really strong and focused, and she knew that she had him on defense the rest of the time. So he was rattled. It's not often that you see that happen in a debate where somebody is that rattled and upset, and that it was quite interesting to see over the first few minutes that transition that took place from the first 5 to 10 minutes to really after that point.
Well, you teased my last question for you, actually. Do you think we are going to see a second debate between former president?
I hope so, because I will honestly admit I was so nervous going into watching it last night. I wasn't sure I could sit through it and that I could handle, but it was a little rough for the first 5 or 10 minutes, just kind of until they got into it a little bit more and settled in. And I really hope, I thought it was great. I thought it was really important for people to see and hear. And I think it did a terrific job of showing the true differences between these folks. So I hope, going into it, Donald Trump said, "I'll debate anytime, anywhere." And coming out of it now, all of a sudden, hey, well, I'm not so sure about it. And, she issued the challenge last night and said, bring it on, and good for her. I appreciate it.
All right. Jeff Rusnak, thank you very much for your insight. We appreciate it here on Ohio Has Issues.
Of course. Thanks. Take care. Be well.
That was Jeff Rusnak, Democratic strategist, giving us his take.
He's a charming gentleman.
Beautiful background.
It is. Was scintillating.
Sorry for everyone you heard shouting in the newsroom in that interview. If you heard some audio in the back, it's a newsroom.
Colorful. But yeah, it sounded like a real cool newsroom.
Mm-hmm.
It did. Real busy.
People milling about.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. We only have how many more episodes until the election? We're only doing this up until the election, just a reminder.
7.
7 more episodes you got to put up with us up until the election, and then we got an election, folks. 54 days.
54
days, a couple hours until the election. So thanks for watching.
We'll see you next week here on Ohio Has Issues.
Bye.